time. Why is time important? Why is time important to people with intellectual disabilities? Why is time important to people who know, who live with, and work with people with intellectual disabilities? If you live in the United States, your life expectancy is 79 years. You have 41,500,000 minutes to engage in life. If you live in Japan, your life expectancy is 84 years. You then have 44 million minutes to engage in life. If you're a person with a disability, your life expectancy ranges from 50 to 70 years. You have 26 million to 37 million minutes to engage in life. So why is time important? When I initially started thinking about this talk, I planned to focus on the environment and the importance of the environment to people with intellectual disabilities. As family members, as caregivers and providers, we think about the environment and how it supports or does not support people with intellectual disabilities. We focus on creating an environment that promotes optimal health, development, and quality of life. To guide my thinking about this, I went to the book, Intellectual Disability, Definition, Classification, and Systems of Support, that was prepared by AAIDD's Ad Hoc Committee on Technology and on Terminology and Classification. Thinking about how an intellectual disability is defined and described made good sense to me. This became an adventure for me as I thought about the meaning and the dimensions of intellectual disability. So what does an intellectual disability mean? According to the AAIDD book I just mentioned, an intellectual disability is characterized by significant limitations in intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior. These limitations are expressed through conceptual, social, and practical adaptive skills. An intellectual disability originates before a person reaches age 18. So with this definition were assumptions that we should consider when following this definition. A person's limitation in functioning must be considered in the context of community environments that are typical of the person's age peers and their culture. A valid assessment of a person's ability should consider cultural and linguistic diversity and differences in communication, sensory, motor, and behavioral factors. A person's limitation often coexists with their strengths. So an important purpose for describing limitation is to determine the supports a person needs. When appropriate supports are personalized over a sustained period of time, the life functioning of the person with an intellectual disability will improve. This points to the importance of time, as supports are personalized over a sustained period of time. So here's where my thinking shifted from environment to time. I began thinking about the times I've read an IEP, an IHP, or individualized health plan or behavior support plan that included outdated information about a person's abilities. That is, we were making decisions on the basis of assessments that had been conducted much earlier. For example, a person with an intellectual disability may have experienced health challenges that could account for a decline in cognitive, communication, and adaptive skills, but assessments of cognition, communication, and adaptive skills were outdated. Family members and service providers might be frustrated with the behavior of an adult with a disability, but the plan and the interventions were based on assessments that were conducted several years earlier. On the other hand, a person with an intellectual disability may have assumed new responsibilities in a work setting, have good health, and increased involvement in the community. Yet the plan and intervention continued to be based on assessments that were completed years before this increased independence. The expectations of family members and service providers may be limiting the person's ability to engage in self-determination and increased independence. So time is important. Time is important to the person with an intellectual disability in that information that's used in planning with the person with an intellectual disability can be outdated and accurate. Partnering with the person to develop a plan for health, for social life, for job, and education can help mitigate negative outcomes. This requires true partnering with and careful attention to what's going on in the life of the person. Time is important to family members and service providers. Early perceptions and expectations of a person's abilities can continue over a lifetime. When perceptions and expectations of what a person can accomplish are limited, the person may be held back from developing, growing, and gaining independence. On the other hand, professionals may not identify an intellectual disability early in life, resulting in expectations that a person can indeed accomplish more than they're capable of. Or a person's gradual decline in cognitive ability may go unrecognized. Behavior problems may be treated with medication when careful examination of cognitive ability could provide a more realistic view of the supports a person needs. So time is important to the person with an intellectual disability, to family members, and service providers. Going back to AAIDD's definition of intellectual disability, a conceptual framework of human functioning was developed, and this framework has these 5 dimensions: intellectual abilities, adaptive behavior, health, participation, and context. This framework shows the association between the 5 dimensions and human functioning and the reciprocal relationship between human functioning and supports. So intellectual abilities can be considered synonymous with intelligence and human function, or how we comprehend our surroundings, how we make sense of and figure out what to do. Adaptive behavior refers to the conceptual, social, and practical skills that a person has learned and performs in everyday life. And health refers to a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and can affect a person's functioning directly or indirectly through the other dimensions, such as through participation. Participation refers to how a person performs in activities in social life. It includes roles and interactions in the home, at work, in educational settings, in leisure and recreational settings, and in church. Context represents an ecological perspective that was described by Bronfenbrenner. So this is an example of Bronfenbrenner's ecological perspective. The microsystem is the immediate social environment that includes the person, family, and/or advocates. The mesosystem refers to the neighborhood, community, or organizations that provide education or rehabilitation or services or supports to the person with an intellectual disability. And the macrosystem is the culture or subculture, belief systems, and resources available to the person. So supports are the resources and strategies that aim to promote the development, education, interest, and personal well-being of a person, and that enhance individual functioning. And there are really 3 areas of support that serve as a basis of supports. One is context, one is congruency, and the other is an egalitarian basis for supports. The context in which supports are given include the environment or circumstances in which the behavior occurs, which is important. The reality, and a reality that's ongoing and changing, and involves the environment being transformed by its members who are transformed by the environment. Persons actively determine their development and functioning. Congruence between the person and the environment, determining the profile and intensity of needed supports of a person and providing the supports needed to enhance human functioning is key to facilitating congruence. And the ecological model described by Bronfenbrenner is consistent with the definition of intellectual disability, in that it views the disabling process as a relationship among pathology, impairments, and one's environment. The key word from my point of view is process. This means that a person can and of course does experience changes that influence the relationship among health or pathology, impairments or functioning, and their environment. The egalitarian basis of supports or a belief again in human equality, especially that perspective related to social, political, and economic rights. This refers to the right to a free and appropriate education, community-based services, and freedom from discrimination only on the basis of disability. As service providers, we have focused on person-centered planning, self-advocacy, and personal empowerment. These trends support the importance of support. It supports in enhancing human functioning. I propose that time must be considered in the framework of human functioning, in each dimension and between dimensions, and human functioning and between human functioning and support. For example, intellectual abilities, adaptive behavior, health, and participation in activities may change. One dimension may affect another dimension or may affect all dimensions. Changes in the context or the systems described by Bronfenbrenner in his ecological theory influence each other, and these changes occur over time. Changes occur over time in the microsystems, and changes occur in the linkages between the microsystems. Cultural changes occur. These cultural changes can occur quickly, or they may occur slowly. Changes may be easy to recognize or subtle and very difficult to recognize. So Bronfenbrenner's bioecological theory of human development is a perspective that I propose we consider for intellectual disabilities. The bioecological theory includes 4 components and dynamic relationships occurring among these components. And the components are person, process, context, and time. Process refers to the forms of interaction between a person and their environment. Proximal processes, or those processes that are closest to the person with an intellectual disability. These occur over time, and they're primary mechanisms of producing changes in human development, or essentially producing human development. The person refers to the characteristics of the developing person. Context refers to the immediate or even the more distant environments a person has contact with. And time refers to the periods in which these proximal processes occur. So in discussing the evolution of the bioecological model from the ecological model, Bronfenbrenner referred to Elder's work on life course theory and adds to Elder's principles. So here I've listed Glenn Elder's principles of life course theory, and there are really 4: historical, time and place, timing and lives, linked lives, and human agency. So the principle of historical time and place, in that principle, life course of an individual is embedded in and shaped by historical times and events they experience over their lifetime. Timing in lives refers to the developmental impact of a succession of life transitions or events and is contingent on when they occur in a person's life. In linked lives, we live our lives independently, and social and historical influences are expressed through this network of shared relationships. Environmental changes occur across time, can contribute to developmental changes that are disruptive or that actually enhance growth. Human agency. In human agency, we construct our own life course through the choices and actions we make within the opportunities and constraints of history and social circumstances. And last is a principle that Bronfenbrenner added to Elder's principles, and this is that changes over time in the 4 components of the bioecological model are not only products, but also producers of change, historical change. So our challenge in considering intellectual disability from the bioecological perspective is to identify factors, or you might say variables, something that we can actually measure, that represents each component of the theory. Time is present in each component of the ecological model and in each part of the bioecological model. Time is present in the multidimensional framework for understanding intellectual disability. So we must recognize and respect the presence of time and the changing environment over time. This recognition and respect for time and the environment is important as we continue developing an understanding of intellectual disability and as we move forward in thoughtful and deliberate planning with persons with an intellectual disability. We have 1,400 minutes in a day, 43,000 minutes in a month, and 526,000 minutes in a year. There's incredible opportunity for producing change. Thank you.